An American family of four pulls up to a fast food drive-thru after an exhausting day. The parents are spent, the kids are starving, and cooking at home feels like an impossible task. They order a few basic burgers, fries, and drinks, the quick, reliable meal working families have leaned on for decades. Then the screen lights up with the total, nearly 40. That sudden spike of panic at the speaker box is no longer an anomaly. It is becoming the default American experience. In a 2024 LendingTree survey, 62% of respondents said rising prices forced them to eat less fast food. 65% experienced severe sticker shock, and 78% stated that fast food now feels like an outright luxury. But how did meals designed specifically for working-class budgets transform into high-ticket expenses that those same families can no longer justify? Inflation explains part of the story, but it certainly doesn't explain all of it. Behind that crumpled receipt lies a massive, invisible ecosystem of aggressive franchise fees, soaring real estate rents, algorithmic loyalty apps, private equity takeovers, and corporate financial engineering. The real story isn't that fast food is going extinct. The real story is that the industry is learning how to generate record profits while abandoning the very demographic it was built to serve. The macro data proves this shift isn't a temporary glitch. Even as overall inflation cools down, your drive-through receipt refuses to drop. In June 2026, general consumer prices sat 2.7% higher year over year. But limited service meals and snacks, the federal category tracking fast food, rose by 3.1%, while food purchased away from home jumped 3.4%. Those percentages might look minor on paper until you stack them on top of years of relentless compounded hikes. The USDA logged a 4.1% jump in food away from home costs in 2024, followed by another 3.8% in 2025, with an additional 3.5% climb projected through 2026. Slowing inflation doesn't mean prices are falling, it just means the damage is compounding at a slightly slower rate. When a family meal surges from $25 to $35, a subsequent 3% hike doesn't bring that price back down. It cements that $35 baseline forever. Across millions of households, the adaptation is silent but brutal. A mother quietly cancels the extra fries, forces the kids to share a drink, or looks at the total and uses those 5 notorious words. There is food at home. What we are witnessing is the rapid emergence of a K-shaped fast food economy. During the first quarter of 2025, US same-store sales at McDonald's dropped 3.6%, its steepest domestic decline since the 2020 lockdowns. Executive leadership openly admitted that traffic from consumers earning under $45,000 a year plummeted by double digits. Yet, visits from households earning over $100,000 remained completely stable. Consider a nursing assistant wrapping up a double shift with $20 left before payday. She needs gas, breakfast for tomorrow, and something her child will actually eat tonight. Fast food used to be her ultimate relief valve. Today, a quick mental calculation reveals that frozen grocery store items can stretch across 2 full days for the exact same price. The math simply broke down. Here is the central paradox. Even as working families flee, corporate giants keep expanding. A chain can serve millions fewer customers and still post record-breaking revenue. Serve 100 people at $10 each, and you make $1,000. Serve 90 people at $12 each, and your revenue jumps to $1,080. You lost 10 real human beings, but your quarterly earnings report looks phenomenal. By Q4 2025, McDonald's posted a 5.7% global sales growth, pushing system-wide sales past $139 billion. Starbucks tracked a 7.9% surge in US sales by mid-2026. The industry is actively weaponizing this split. Through algorithmic loyalty apps, private equity buyouts, and hidden franchise structures, chains are quietly segmenting their customers, turning basic affordability into a privilege you can only unlock if you trade away your personal data. The drive-thru was built on simplicity, speed, and low costs. Today, it has become a high-stakes financial game where the customer almost always loses. To understand how fast food transformed from a cheap commodity into a high-margin corporate product, it is necessary to examine the structural origin of the modern franchise system. The contemporary fast food landscape was not created by accident. It is the direct result of financial models, real estate strategies, and policy shifts established over the past 7 decades. During the mid-20th century, fast food expanded rapidly across the United States due to the construction of the interstate highway system and suburban expansion. Ray Kroc, who built the McDonald's Corporation into a global entity after purchasing the rights from Richard and Maurice McDonald, realized early on that selling burgers yielded narrow profit margins. The breakthrough that scaled the business was formulated by Harry J. Sonneborn, McDonald's first president and chief executive officer. Sonneborn famously stated that the company was not technically in the food business, but in the real estate business. Under the Sonneborn model, the corporate parent entity bought or leased the land and buildings for future restaurant locations. The company then subleased these properties to individual franchisees at a significant markup, often charging a combination of fixed monthly rent and a percentage of gross monthly sales. This structure decoupled corporate profitability from daily store operations. If a franchisee struggled with rising ingredient costs or local economic downturns, the corporate headquarters still collected its mandatory rent and royalty payments. By the late 1960s, this corporate framework became the industry standard across major chains, including Burger King, Wendy's, and Kentucky Fried Chicken. The model shifted financial risk downward to local operators, while securing predictable, recurring cash flow for parent corporations and shareholders. Over time, as commercial real estate values appreciated across major metropolitan areas, the baseline rent owed by franchisees escalated sharply. Today, real estate obligations represent one of the single largest fixed operating costs for any franchise location, directly influencing the bottom-line price listed on the menu. The secondary driver of long-term price structural inflation involves the supply chain mechanics of mass agriculture. For several decades, government agricultural policies, specifically the United States Farm Bills of the 1970s, under Agriculture Secretary Earl Butz, encouraged massive overproduction of commodity crops like corn and soybeans. This policy environment flooded the market with cheap, high-fructose corn syrup, grain-fed beef, and hydrogenated oils. Fast food chains built their entire pricing structure around these heavily subsidized agricultural inputs. However, over the past 2 decades, that supply chain advantage has progressively eroded. Changes in global weather patterns, rising fertilizer costs driven by geopolitical conflicts, and shifting trade policies have increased raw food input volatility. For example, between 2020 and 2024, the Producer Price Index for farm-raised beef, poultry, and dairy experienced double-digit percentage surges. Because large fast food corporations negotiate long-term supply agreements while passing actual cost fluctuations down to franchisees, local operators had no choice but to adjust their retail menu boards to protect operating margins. At the same time, labor market dynamics underwent a fundamental shift. Historically, the fast food industry relied on a steady supply of teenage workers and part-time labor willing to work for federal or state minimum wages. Following the economic disruptions of 2020 and subsequent labor realignments through 2024 and 2025, the pool of low-wage labor contracted significantly. States like California implemented targeted legislation, such as Assembly Bill 1228, which established a $20 per hour minimum wage floor for fast food workers starting in April 2024. While corporate headquarters frequently cited these legislative changes as the primary cause for price hikes, independent financial audits revealed a more complex reality. Labor costs typically account for 25% to 30% of total revenue at a standard fast food outlet. When wage floors rose, many regional operators did not absorb the increase through compressed margins. Instead, they implemented broad price increases across all menu categories, multiplying the actual cost impact on the consumer. Furthermore, The post-2008 era of low interest rates accelerated the entry of private equity firms into the restaurant space. Institutional investors recognized that franchise networks generated predictable cash flows that could be leveraged to service corporate debt. Firms such as Rourke Capital Group, Blackstone, and 3G Capital acquired massive portfolios of iconic quick-service brands. When a private equity firm acquires a franchise network, the capital structure changes. Acquisitions are frequently financed through leveraged buyouts, burdening the restaurant entity with substantial debt service requirements. To maintain projected investor returns under these debt loads, parent organizations often introduce new technology fees, mandatory store remodels, and increased supply purchase obligations onto the franchisees. These compounding corporate overhead expenses inevitably trickle down to the final retail transaction. The result of these converging historical factors, real estate monetization, supply chain volatility, structural wage adjustments, and private equity leverage, is a business model that can no longer sustain the ultra-low-cost menus of the late 20th century. The $1 value menu was not killed by consumer preference. It was dismantled by 7 decades of financial engineering that prioritized corporate margin protection over low-cost consumer accessibility. The widening disconnect between corporate profit reports and retail menu prices manifests across 3 structural battles currently defining the fast food industry: legislative wage mandates, third-party delivery monetization, and dynamic pricing algorithms. The political conflict reached a peak in California following the passage of Assembly Bill 1228, which took effect on April 1, 2024. The law established a $20 per hour minimum wage floor for fast food workers employed by chains operating 60 or more locations nationwide. In response, major franchise operators immediately implemented sweeping price adjustments. Chipotle Mexican Grill raised menu prices across California locations by 6% to 7.5%, while franchisees for McDonald's, Jack in the Box, and Wendy's introduced price increases ranging from 8% to 10% within weeks of the law's enactment. However, regulatory filings reveal a deeper tension between corporate headquarters and local operators. While franchisees bore the direct payroll increase, corporate parent organizations maintained their mandatory royalty calculations based on top-line gross revenue rather than net operating profit. Consequently, when franchisees raised prices to offset wage increases, corporate tax and royalty revenues automatically increased as a percentage of overall transactions. A second operational friction point involves third-party delivery platforms such as DoorDash, Uber Eats, and Grubhub. Delivery services have introduced an opaque layer of pricing overhead that artificially inflates meal costs. Investigations into platform pricing structures indicate that fast food chains systematically mark up items sold through delivery applications by 15% to 30% compared to in-store menu boards to offset platform commission fees. When a consumer orders a basic combo meal via a delivery application, the listed price of the food is routinely set at $14 rather than the $10 charged at the counter. When combined with service fees, delivery fees, and driver tips, the total cost for a single fast food meal often exceeds $25. This dynamic has created a dual-tier pricing system where middle and upper-income households absorb delivery premiums, while lower-income consumers are priced out of convenience entirely. The industry's newest operational shift relies on digital menu boards and algorithmic pricing. In early 2024, Wendy's announced a $20 million investment to install digital menu boards across its system, enabling tests of dynamic pricing mechanisms. While the company publicly clarified that it did not intend to implement surge pricing during peak hours, the technological infrastructure permits real-time price adjustments based on regional demand, weather conditions, inventory levels, and store foot traffic. Economists classify this strategy as dynamic value capture. Rather than maintaining static pricing across all locations, algorithms analyze local purchasing data to maximize the revenue extracted from each individual transaction. For customers who do not utilize mobile applications, menu boards can display higher base prices. Meanwhile, loyalty app users receive targeted, algorithmic discounts designed to maintain their individual purchase thresholds without lowering prices for the broader public. Data extraction has become a core line of business for global restaurant operators. When a customer uses a mobile application to order food, the transaction yields granular consumer metrics, including exact geographic locations, visit frequencies, daily routines, and payment methods. In 2025, McDonald's processed nearly $37 billion in system-wide sales through its loyalty program, driven by 210 million active users. Starbucks recorded over 35 million active rewards members who generated roughly 60% of revenue at US company-operated locations. These loyalty platforms allow corporate managers to engage in personalized price discrimination. If an application identifies that a specific customer regularly buys a $6 breakfast item on Monday mornings, the algorithm can withhold discounts from that user while offering a $2 promotional credit to a casual user who hasn't visited in 3 weeks. Affordability is no longer a standard market feature. It is an individualized incentive deployed to modify consumer behavior. The corporate reaction to public backlash over rising prices further illustrates these strategic priorities. In mid-2024, facing declining traffic among low-income consumers, major chains launched temporary value meals. McDonald's introduced a $5 meal promotion, which was subsequently extended due to franchisee participation, while Burger King and Wendy's rolled out competing $5 deal structures. However, independent franchisee associations expressed concern over the long-term viability of these promotions. Because ingredient costs, utility rates, and commercial rents remained elevated, franchisees frequently operated $5 value meals at razor-thin margins or break-even levels. Many operators reported that these marketing initiatives functioned primarily as loss leaders to bring traffic through the door, with the expectation that customers would purchase add-on items like desserts or upgraded drinks carrying higher profit margins. At the executive level, capital allocation choices demonstrate where corporate priorities lie. During 2025, while franchise operators navigated squeezed margins and rising labor demands, major quick-service corporations continued allocating billions of dollars to share buybacks and dividend payments. McDonald's allocated over $2 billion toward repurchasing its own stock in 2025, a practice designed to reduce the supply of shares and increase earnings per share for equity investors. The clash within the modern fast food system is not simply a conflict between inflation and customer budgets. It is a structural shift where parent corporations, private equity funds, delivery platforms, and software vendors extract value from every layer of the transaction. The local franchisee absorbs operational